I would like to introduce Peter, and since this is the Strand bookstore, and I used to come here and I used to buy books by Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs and Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and it was like the Beat Days, and that's when I met Peter. So I have a little intro here of a little piece I wrote in a la Kerouac style. I first met Peter Mac's Kaleidoscope in the spring of '66 when I was an art director at a small ad agency working on a big flick called Fantastic Voyage for 20th Century Fox, whose studio head, Daryl Zanuck, had his buddy Salvatore Dali do a poster. And when I saw him, I clued him that it was cool but paranoid. And I knew an artist who can really get it straight, so I called Peter Max and asked him if he'd like to do a Fantastic Voyage. And he said he was just coming off one, but I hipped him that this was a celluloid trip through the human body, which he double dug, and invited me over to his pad and sip a little tea and talk it over. And when I got there, he showed me his psychedelic collage visions, and as I looked into his eyes, I knew that he knew that I knew that he knew, and it would have kept going on that way, but right then, his white Persian cat leaped on my lap and licked my nose of curiosity into now, at which point Peter Mac's Kaleidoscope said, let's go to Hung Fat's in Chinatown and get some noodles, which he ordered in Chinese, and told me about his childhood in China, while the waiter poured hot tea in our water glasses and served tofu and snow peas with black bean sauce before I knew what tofu was, until Giorgio Sawa and Michio Kushi hipped us to macrobiotics, and we got our yin and yangs imbalanced. We got Mellow Yellow and read Hermann Hesse and Alan Watts and Aldous Huxley, and it was a whole new cosmic ball game as we hung out with Noets and poets and flute heads and tabla heads, and things started to rock and raga as East met West, and our friend Chuck went to Ibiza and met Conrad Rooks, who was producing Chappaqua with Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs and Ravi Shankar, and then met Swami Satchidananda in Candy Ceylon and brought him to Paris to keep him in the groove while he edited his flick, and then heard about the man with kaleidoscope eyes and brought him to Paris and introduced him to the Swami and made a connection that shook the continent. Now, one more half a page. How auspicious was that, being just after Max collaged himself into a cosmic corner, which is what happens when you try to kaleidoscope a kaleidoscope. Like, who do you call? Now, if he had the hotline to hyperspace, he could have put the big question mark square onto old equation head himself, Professor Einstein in Princeton. But even if he did get a hold of Big Al, and they rapped in Yiddish and said Kiddush, they still would have ended up at the blackboard without chalk. I mean, this was a comic bubble that would give my man Hubble double trouble, and even make Stephen Hawking big bang his head against the wall. So Max got on his Starship Enterprise and made the mother of all collages, which was so big he had to climb up the 10-foot ladder to dig it. When he got to the top, he saw it was still not it. And just then, a bearded saffron sage appeared on the Innovision channel and told him to chill out. And now, dig this, the Swami, who Max meets in Paris, turns out to be the bearded cat from his vision and is now looking him straight in the eyes. Well, this was how Peter went to Paris and met Swami Satchidananda, brought him to New York, and helped open the Integral Yoga Institute. And not only did Peter revolutionize the whole art scene in New York with his incredible cosmic art, but also is very instrumental in actually bringing yoga to America, because Swami opened the first Integral Yoga Institute on West 13th Street, and it was a great thing that Peter did. So let me now turn this over to Peter.
Can I sit down? You can see me, everybody? Is that right? Yeah. Okay, well that's very nice what you just wrote. A kaleidoscope. That's really nice.
This was just a little thing that I did one day, and was just a way of tapping into the creative energy of the time. So.
Good. Anyhow, Victor and I are old buddies. We go back quite a few years, and we have a beautiful studio on 65th Street. Some of you know Manhattan. Shun Li, there's a restaurant there. It's on 65th, opposite Columbus. We have 2 gigantic floors there. And Victor and I have been working there for many years, about 40, 50 people. And so the thing that's interesting is that I'm extremely excited about this book that I have, and Victor helped me write it, and we made this book, and it's going to be, they already HarperCollins, who's the publisher, think it's going to sell a few 100,000 books. And somebody at HarperCollins says, Peter, I make you a bet it's going to sell 1 million copies. I went, wow, that sounds good. But the thing is, I travel every single week. I'm in a different city. Let's say out of 52 weeks a year, I travel 45 weekends a year. And I'm always gone Saturday and Sunday. Occasionally it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I always have at least 3 gallery shows. It's not the same gallery morning and afternoon. I have one gallery show in one, I have another one, and then we take a car ride or a small plane trip, and I do 3 gallery shows. And there's always about a good 200 people, 150 people per gallery. And I do 3 gallery shows for about, 45 weekends a year. It's amazing, right? And I do that. And now that this book is out, each gallery's gotten stacks, and they called me today. This book is only out 2 days. They already sold close to 20,000 books. I can't believe it, but I'm glad you're all here to have it. I love how the whole book looks and how it feels, and I'd love to talk to you about some ideas. Does anybody have a question? Something we're going to talk to me about? Let me just, a second.
I was just going to ask you.
Okay, ask me.
Well, Peter started out as a realist painter in the Art Students League, and when I first saw his realism work, it was just really exceptional. And then he quickly evolved, and he could tell you what happened when he started to go out with his realism, and then got into an innovative graphic art style, which was these collages that I saw, that I described in this little incident when I was working on this film. And it was revolutionary in itself. It kind of was a whole new kind of surrealism that didn't exist before, and Peter Max was the only one that did it. You'll see some of those images in the book. And from there, everything just evolved into his cosmic art style, which was just an evolution. So from the collages, you had this experience of meeting Swami, is bringing you back here, and how yoga influenced your art and the line and the whole thing that exploded into the cosmic 60s style.
Is that a question?
The question is, the question
He loves it. I'm very happy for him.
Okay. The question is, how did this evolution of this new style occur?
Okay, I'll explain to you. In my early style, it was outlines with black line and beautiful flat colors. And first of all, some of you know, if you read part of the book, I grew up in Shanghai, China. My parents fled Germany when I was maybe 6 months old. And I lived there till I was 9.5, so I lived there almost 9 to 10 years. And when I was about 3, my father used to own maybe 4 or 5 men's retail shops, because all the Europeans that came to Shanghai, there were 10,000 of us, they had to wear European clothes. In Shanghai, they don't make that, not back then. And so my father had in every store, he had 5 stores, and 3 of his friends opened the stores. And in every store, he had about 20 tailors in the back, and then he had a beautiful front part with the windows, and him and all these salespeople used to sell all the European clothes that they made in the back. Stuff like he was like Van Heusen, he was like Wrangler jeans, he did it all. I don't know if he ever did blue jeans, but he did all the clothes. And I started drawing at a very early age. But my father at night used to draw with me, and I loved just playing around. I never even knew, I just thought it's something cute you do. My mother loved giving me crayons and pencils. And one day, my mother saw a street artist in Shanghai, and she asked him whether he could come to our house and teach a little 3-year-old boy to draw, because he likes drawing. He says he can't. He's very busy here. He had a can, and people used to drop a coin or two in, and he had his audience. So he said, but my daughter, I'll send my daughter. So I'm about 3 years old, and in comes a girl quite taller than me, but I found that a couple of years later, when I was old enough to get what it was, I was 3 and she was 7. So she was only 4 years older. So when I left Shanghai, and I was 10, she was 14. And when the ship pulled away from China, I cried and cried for 2 things. My little nanny, her name was Umba, beautiful, sweet little girl, and she was 14 when I left. I met her when she was 7. And then I also missed my little nanny, And so I just missed my Omba, the girl, and I missed my little kitty cat, Mushy, the Chinese little cat. The Chinese cats are like Chinese cats. But then when we moved from Shanghai to Israel, my mother found an art teacher. His name was Professor Hönig from Austria, and he taught me about light and shadow, and he taught me about brushstrokes and painting, so I studied with him. I started loving him, never thinking that art is something you do when you grow up. I thought I'd have to be an engineer. I always wanted to be an astronomer, as you can tell by my stars, my planets. And then from Israel, I took art classes over there. I would live there for 3.5 years. And then we moved to Paris, where my mother enrolled me in a school at the Louvre. They had it for children. And then and then we came to the United States. I was 16. I went to Lafayette High School. Does anybody know Lafayette High School in Brooklyn? And I'm there the first day in America, and the first day in that morning class. There's always a morning class, and we were going to have gym the first day, and then into the regular classrooms. So there's a tall guy sitting next to me. I don't know him. I don't know anybody in the room. About 50 boys, and we were going to go in. Then a couple guys over there fighting with towels. A couple guys are doing something else. And the guy next to me stands up and he lets out a big aria sound, like yo, something really loud. And I got frightened. He goes, "Oh man," he said, "I hope it didn't scare you." And I'm just new in America, and I go, "That's okay." It wasn't "that's okay," it was "that's okay." And he said to me, "What's your name?" I said, Peter Max. He goes, "My name is Paul Sarvino." You know Paul Sarvino? Yeah. For some of you who haven't heard of him, he has made up to today. I just spoke to him a few days ago. Says, "Paul, how many movies did you do?" Some people say 16, some people 20. He says 84 feature-length films. And Mira Sarvino is his daughter. She got him into the movies because he always wanted to be an opera singer. Like that's what I heard the first time when he made that sound. It scared me. But she got into a movie and she got an Academy Award, and she was only 16. So he got to meet all the directors and producers. He's done so far, I don't know, 80 movies or 50 movies, 70 movies, right? Like unbelievable. So now I have a nice studio in New York. Victor's been with me for a good 20, 30 years, maybe a few more even. And we met. He was an art director at an ad agency, and I was very popular in the art world in Madison Avenue, and I used to work for all the big agencies. I used to do posters and everything. One day, I'm at a printer, and he said, "This is very nice stuff you do. You could run a poster with this." He takes me to another press, and they're making what they call it split fountain. There's a fountain with ink, and sometimes the ink is blue, red, yellow, one color, but he had it where the fountain had, on one side of this fountain was yellow, then it was orange, then it was red, and it was lavender. And the rollers go like this, so they mix the colors together. So when it comes out on paper, it's a beautiful color blend. They call it split fountain. He knows. So I started doing posters with this, and suddenly, after maybe doing 10, 15 posters, Life magazine does a full page on me. This is way back when there were only maybe 8 magazines in America. Life, Look, Collier's, a few of those. And the next 2 months later, because of my posters, they did a 2-page on me. I was out of my mind. It was the biggest thing in the world was Johnny Carson Show, Good Morning America, and Life magazine. So I've been on a Good Morning 2-3 times back then, on a Johnny Carson maybe 4 or 5 times. In fact, there's pictures in there with me and Johnny Carson. And then one day I'm walking with my little boy, who at the time was now in his early 40s. He was about maybe 4 years old. We're walking down Broadway. You know Broadway a little bit, where Zabar's is, that area. And I'm walking by, and there's a newsstand. And this little boy says to me, "Daddy, Daddy, that's you." And I said, "Where? What?" "Over there, Daddy." And I look, he's pointing at a newsstand, and there's a guy inside. But over his head, inside, are 4 Life magazines. And the Life magazine is in the book, right? And there's 4 Life magazine covers. I go, "That's me. I can't believe it." So I buy the 4 magazines. Back then, I think they were 20 cents a piece. And there's only 8, 9 magazines in all of America. Life, Look, Collier's, and a few more. Not to mention Playboy, but...
And when Peter was a young boy in Shanghai, vendors would put up Life magazines. There was Douglas MacArthur, there was famous ball players, Hollywood movie stars. He could never imagine that one day he himself would be on a cover.
Yeah.
Also, tell him about Frank Riley and who his students were.
I will.
And okay, that was also a great discovery of using magazine covers with
Who
Norman
were some of the guys?
Rockwell.
Oh, Norman Rockwell. My art teacher, Frank Riley, studied in the same room as a student where now I was his student. He was a teacher in the same school where he was a student. And they studied on a very famous anatomist by the name of George Bridgman. Some of you may have heard. He was the anatomist of all time. And the kid that sat next to him when they were started out at 18 years old, they were there till they were 26, 27, was Frank Riley, my teacher, and the young kid next to him was none other than Norman Rockwell. So Norman Rockwell and Riley painted the same style. And when I came out of Riley class after 7, 8 years, I drew exactly, hi Freema? I drew exactly like Norman Rockwell and painted like him. And I did that for 2, 3 years. I became extremely popular, did magazine covers, and suddenly what happened is that there were so many magazines out, and all the photographers did covers because there were all the Richard Avedons, the Irving Penns, all these famous photographers, so nobody needed realism anymore. So luckily that style that's in the back of the book with the outline and the style that's inside the book with the outlines was a style that I was drawing since I'm in China. And I started doing it, and suddenly people called me up and asked me if I would design a t-shirt. Sure, I did a t-shirt, and I did posters and did t-shirts, but I was in lots of museums, lots of galleries, but I used to do all these different things, t-shirts and so many beautiful things, and suddenly I had a whole line of product lines. Now somebody may remember the product lines. Is anybody here that remembers it? You're all a little too young, but I had 72 product lines. That means t-shirts, sneakers, socks, blue jeans with Wrangler, t-shirts with this company, and shirts with Van Heusen, the biggest companies. Out of my 72 product lines, about 30 of them were with the huge corporations. And after 3.5 years of doing it, from 68, 69, 70, and a half a year thereafter, I found out, like, if I do this too much, people will remember me as a word for it, as a garmento, a guy who does clothes. You know, I love and respect, I know Calvin Klein very well, I know Ralph Lauren very well, they're old friends of mine, but I didn't want to be one of those guys. I wanted to be the artiste. You know, I always admired Picasso, Cézanne, and all those guys. So I started painting, and I got like over 100 museum shows. And Life magazine, of course, was the biggest. By today, you know, when Life magazine was out, just in the beginning, when I discovered it, there were, at the time, maybe 7, 10 magazines altogether. Do you know how many magazines are out today with different titles? 2,500 different magazines. So in the last 10 years, just the last 10 years, we're now in 2003, so let's say from 2013. So from, let's say, 2003 to 2013, I did 1,123 magazine covers. Can you imagine that? It's unbelievable.
Maybe more than Norman Rockwell.
More than Norman Rockwell. But and each magazine cover caused me to have inside 10 pages, 12 pages. Some magazines would do 40, 50 pages. So it was wild. And then we did all the TV shows. So I came out when media was exploding, you know. So I was very, very lucky. You know, I was lucky to have a great style. I was lucky to have been in Shanghai with my parents and picked up the Oriental kind of calligraphy and colors, because they're great in colors over there too. And then on top of it, you know, I came out just when everything was really cool, and there were thousands of magazines, and there were at the time 10, 15, 20 of the biggest TV shows. Remember Johnny Carson, Merv Griffin, The Morning Show, Today Show, all these. Every show I've done maybe 5, 10 times. And then, like, by now, when Larry King was like on Channel 10, he was on CNN maybe years ago, I knew how to go there. Today, I took a piece of tape on my TV set, which I only open up maybe once every 2 weeks. I'll see if there's anything on. I don't even watch it. And on the side of my TV set next to the tube is a piece of set that says L. King, by the way, he's my friend, channel 263. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to find them. So we're living in a brand new age, and everything is going digital. And in one way, it's weird for me, you know, because I know magazines very well and books and so forth. At the other side of it, it's a tremendous thrill, because it's all going on this, right? Unbelievable. So I've got friends of mine who are into it 1,000 times better, and he's over there, a blonde boy. Okay, that's his son, and he knows the internet beyond belief. And so I'm glad to have someone like you in my life, Jonathan, and so forth. Any questions? Oops. That's my ex-girlfriend from. I'm a happily married boy, but you remember Rosie Vella? She was a very famous Vogue model, 17 covers. That's her. But I'm married now with a very sweet little Irish girl, and we've been together 14, 15 years. You know, I met Mary, who's this little sweet girl. I met her. We were Joe. Did you give me that little mic? I have it?
It's fine.
Huh?
Don't worry about it.
Oh, don't worry about it, because I'm talking about my wife, so I can play it for her. So anyhow, one day I crossed the street with one of our best buddies, Chucky, and I see this girl with the most perfect face I've ever seen in my life. I say to Chucky, you see this girl? He goes, we're going across to get coffee. I said, I'm going to marry her. He goes, Peter, don't do this to me now. And I said, Chucky, I'm going to marry her. He goes, Peter, don't do this to me. I walked over, and she had no clue who Peter Max was. I thought wow, are you Peter Max? Nothing. Didn't know who I was, what I did. But her girlfriend knew, and so next day she called me. So I met with her really quick. I'm sidetracking right now. But I met her the day we had a little decaf and maybe a little something. The next day I met her again. I showed her my studio. And the next day I showed her where I painted home. And she never left. We got married 3 months later. Isn't that nice? I knew exactly. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I feel very honored to be in the same room with you because
Thank you.
you're a great influence, in our lives. But I was wondering, who was your greatest influence in terms of the artist world?
I think who was the biggest, there were different influences. He asked me, who was my biggest influence in the artist world? When I was very young, it was like Norman Rockwell. He was like on every Saturday Evening Post cover. When I got a little bit older and I went to art school, I heard about, Velázquez and John Singer Sargent and Van Gogh, and those guys inspired me to paint. And then Norman Rockwell, he got all the magazine covers. It was something new, So suddenly I had a chance to be on a magazine cover, and I loved it. Every time I walked by a newsstand, there was my magazine covers. Today, I can't walk by a newsstand almost any day without there being at least 1 or 2 covers. So it's really nice. It's a thrill. It's not looked down upon in the art world as it did maybe in the beginning. Are you an artist or are you an illustrator? They used to say things like this. Today, my work is in 1,123 museums. Couldn't believe it. And I've had about maybe 25 to maybe 30 one-man museum shows. And they're probably online maybe right now. Maybe another 60 museums who want to have shows with me. And I've got people in my studio who are organizing it. So probably between now and February, March, I'll probably have 4 or 5 museum shows. So I'm really thrilled.
Some of the other artists that influenced Peter was John Leindecker. I don't know if you're familiar with him, a great artist. And also Maxfield Parrish, because they brought into their artwork like all these Arabian Nights imagery and things that brought Peter back to some of his experiences as a child, seeing those amazing worlds in China and in Tibet and India and other places like that. Right?
Yeah. When I lived in, you can hear me all? When I lived in Shanghai, what was so nice, my father was very, very successful, and there was World War II. We didn't experience it much in Shanghai. It was mostly in Europe, but there was some anxiety and so forth. And when it all ended, my mother wanted to go someplace, so they found a place near Tibet. Like if this is China, and over here Tibet starts, like right below Tibet, a place called Monkashan. And I don't know what it means, but we went there and we stayed there 4, 5, 6 months, high up in the mountains, and all we had over there were Tibetan monks, all with the, walking around always like this and like that. And it was so inspiring to see them. They were all like in a high place of peace, just unbelievable. And you could feel from the monks what it was about them that was so peaceful. Probably it was the meditation and the mantras and all that kind of stuff. And so in 1966, one day, I'm in my American apartment. I'm jumping quite a few years, and I get a phone call, and a guy says to me, "Hi, is this Peter Max?" I said, "Yes." He says, my name is Conrad Rooks. My parents are from the Avon Cosmetic Company. I went, whoa, that's pretty nice. And I'm going to be doing a movie, and I'd love it to be in your style. Could I send you a ticket? I'm in Paris. So I said, no, don't send me a ticket, just give me a number and whatever. I called up, I got myself a ticket. I was making so much money, it didn't matter. And I got on a plane the next day, and I fly with a little bag, maybe for 2 overnights. And I fly to Paris. He picks me up from the airport, tells me how he loves my art, blah, blah, blah. And we get to the Hotel Napoleon near the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe, you know, that big arch. And we go inside and we sit down and we have a little brunch. And suddenly I see quite, you know, maybe like 50, 60, 70 feet away, a very interesting man, all in orange, from here down to his toes, in a big, kind of like, almost like a Chinese outfit. And I look at him, and then he disappears. The next thing I know, he's standing between me and Conrad, and he goes, hello? Conrad says, Peter, this is Swami Satchidananda. And, oh, hello. I didn't know what a Swami was. I thought Swami was like Sammy. I had no idea that he was a priest from India. And we talk, and after about 15, 20 minutes, I said to myself, what do you do? And Conrad interrupts me, he says, Peter, he's a high priest. He comes from, you know, 30 years of meditation, this and that. I was like, you know, this is about 2 years before the Beatles had the Maharishi. Because when the Beatles had the Maharishi, the first one who called me up on it was George Harrison. Called me up, says, hey Peter, it's George. Oh, hi buddy, how you doing? Listen, we also just got a Swami. Really? Yeah, his name is Maharishi. Remember that? When the Swami was with the Beatles? So anyhow, so now there's about 1,000 different Swamis in America. And each Swami has 5 centers, some have 10 centers. Our Swami has about 45 centers, 1,000 acres in Virginia, and places all over. He passed away about 8-10 years ago. He was just 2 weeks short of 90. But it's all about meditation and being calm and loving yourself and loving everybody like I love you all. You know, that's the true path in life, is to walk around, love everything, the birds and the trees. Even if there's a little ant in the street, even if there's like a little bug, I always pick them up and I walk them to the park and I let them out. I never kill anything because it's a nice thing to do.
And in Tibet, you also met this German scientist who introduced you to astronomy.
Yeah. When I lived in Tibet, we lived in a beautiful, like, hotel that was built by the British in Tibet. As I say, like maybe 2-3 miles below Tibet, just but very, very north. And one day I'm downstairs sitting, and there was I had like a little Chinese nanny that worked with me when we were in Tibet. I was about 10 years old, and I'm sitting on the bench with him, and he says, you know how sometimes during the day the moon is out? It was maybe 4 or 5 o'clock, the moon was out. And he said to me, young fellow, do you know what that is? I said, yes, it's the moon. Do you know how big it is? I go, no. And he explained to me that the Earth is so large, which was profound, and that the moon is maybe 1/4 or less as big. And then the next night there were a couple stars out, and he got me so wound up about astronomy that's all even though I drew all my life, that was just like a game, like playing ping pong or skipping rope. All I really wanted to do is become an astronomer. So that's why you see in my art and my pages always astronomy. That led to me to do swamis and holy people. It's about the universe. What is behind us being here, so alive, and we have all these amazing, billions and billions of cells. And each cell has billions and billions of other little things in it. Billions in a single cell, that if you had one on your hand, you couldn't even see it. And it is made of billions and billions of other things. It just goes down and down, and there's billions and billions of suns all over the universe. And that's what got me so excited with the astronomer man I met and the holy people from near Tibet. Then I met the Swami in Paris, and I brought him to America. And Victor and I were young buddies way, way back, and we followed all the Swamis and the holy people. And now yoga and meditation has become like worldwide, right?
Yes. There's so many facets to Peter's evolution as an artist and what he's done, and his styles. In addition to all of his paintings, which are in museums all over, and it's like his monumental works and how he painted a Boeing airplane, and just recently the hull of the Norwegian Line's Breakaway, which is
Have
the
you seen
largest
it?
cruise ship.
Hull of the biggest cruise ship in the world. So you know, the airplane, forgive me, the airplane and the cruise ship didn't touch me so much as it did the little 10-year-old in me. We all have little 10-year-olds in us. I stood in front of that ship, which is 50 times as long as this room, if not more. And I knew all the art. But of course, they painted it in Norway. 430 artists were hanging down on these little things, 220 on one side and 220 on the other side, for about 5 months. Something that I drew this big in a little color, was maybe the size of a quarter of this room, blown up 1,000 times the size. So it took all these artists to do this. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Okay.
Do you want to tell them how you did the Continental plane with Gordon Bethune?
Oh yeah. Have you ever seen my plane a little bit? I still love it. I wish they would do another one. After I did a plane and then I did a ship, I thought to myself, man, the only thing left for me to do is like a satellite. And guess what? Somebody called me up 2 weeks ago and said, we're building a ship that's going to go to space. Do you think we could get a little Peter Max on it? And I made believe, let me see. I wanted it. I said, yeah, I could. Could you send me a picture of it? So I got that a few days ago. I don't know if I'm going to do it next month or two, maybe in the beginning of the year. It'll be nice. A plane, a ship, a thing, right? In space. So what you were saying?
Well, another thing you might talk about is when you started to paint again, because Peter studied in realism. It would take you like a couple of weeks to do a painting.
A week at least. Face and realistic, so it looks like a photograph.
And the 60s evolved when he started to do these pen and ink drawings, and then he had the sense of color that he was able to create all of these posters in color on the printing press. So he was involved in a lot of printing. But then when you got back and you did another retreat and you started to paint again, when you started to set up your paints and started to paint spontaneously, which evolved into your expressionistic style today. Could you talk about how that started
what?
to
It's
happen?
funny. I have, in my studio, I have a studio room where I paint, which is about maybe from there to that pole, but maybe 1.5 times as big. And in the middle, I have an easel. And I've got all kinds of books and things all over the place. And then I have a palette, which is a thing this big, that big. And I have a top. It's a metal top that has hard rubber on it. When you shake the rubber, I take the top off and there's 77 colors. That means it's got 77, that's 11 colors. 11 and 7 wide, so it's 77 colors. So in the spectrum of colors there's only 5, 6 prime colors, yellow, red, and blue. There's other colors, but they're all mixed down, so I've got almost all the shades. I don't have to take a color from here, take a color from here, and mix it. I just dip into the color I want. Maybe I touch another color a little bit, but most of the time, how many colors do you need? More than 77? Because in the primary colors you only have yellow, red, and blue, black and white, and I've turned them into 77 colors. But sometimes I'll take a little pink, a little blue, so I have 2 colors on the brush, and I like it to come out that way. So I paint every day. When I am about a block or 2 away from my studio, I get this little light adrenaline in me, meaning like, I can't wait to be upstairs. The music's playing. I love music so much. It's like one of the biggest things I love. And the music's playing, and I love rock and roll. I like all kinds of jazz and so forth. I have a very big collection. I got to tell you about my collection of my 22,000 pieces of music that I got. I told you before about making an animated movie. Did I mention it? I didn't. I'm doing I can skip it. I'm doing an animated film. Images, the black line drawings I have with the outlines. I've got so many. I have enough for 100 films, because each film doesn't mean it needs a different drawing. The same drawing could move and move and move, and it becomes something else. So I've laid out a concept, and I have 7 concepts about the movie. One film is all about the cosmos and the universe. The next one's all special light effects and colors and kaleidoscopes, lots of music. And the next one is poetic. The next thing is an unbelievable love story. It just goes on like that. But I had all the things laid out, everything. The only thing I didn't have enough of was music, that I've selected. Everybody has a few thousand pieces of music. Imagine, everybody today has a few thousand pieces of music. But I wanted more. So I called up my buddy in England, Paul McCartney, and I said, Paul, would you do me a favor? Do you have a big collection of music? And I described to him what I like, and he sent me about 3,200 songs. But back then when he used to collect music, like years ago, there were big albums, right? Then there were cassettes. He sent me something this big, and it had 3,000 pieces of music on it. It's unbelievable. Like when you fold a dollar bill, it's about this big and this high. That's how much. And then I called up my friend Bon Jovi. He gave me about 2,500 songs. Then Ringo called me up and says, "Hey, Peter, it's Ringo. I put some music together for your film. Would you like some?" "Oh, Ringo, thank you, my buddy. Thank you." 3 days later, I got that. And I got some from some other famous people. And then friends of mine. And before I had, 10,000 pieces of music and 15. And then I had like 22,000 pieces. And those very small iPods, they're about this big and this high. They're very, very thin. I have about 26 or maybe 28 iPods. And I had one of my assistants put all the music on the iPod, but just 500 songs in here and 1,000 songs there. So, and I always, when I leave, I travel every week, and I always have 2-3 iPods, one in this pocket, one in that pocket, and I know which iPod is iPod number 14, iPod number 16, because I know what music is in there. So God forbid I lose an iPod, I don't lose 4,000 songs. I'll lose 500. We can replace it. But I have them already duplicated right now, so I'm organized. So now, as I'm listening to music, this is today, 2013, okay? A creative guy wants to do a film. He's got 22, 24 iPods, about 25,000 songs, let's say, right? Or 20. And I take the iPod, I'm listening it on the plane, and listen. If I love it, 5 stars. If I love it a lot, but it's slower, it's not very fast music, 4 stars. And if I love it also, but it's a little bit weird, it's not like a tune that's like 5 stars or 4 stars. It's just got wacky things to it. That's not really quite music, but half sound effects. That's 3 stars. So I've got selected about 1,400 number 3, and about 2,000 in number 4, and about 3,500 to 4,000 in 5 stars. That means I've got enough for 20 films.
Peter once said that if he wasn't an artist, he would probably be a player in a rock and roll band. But the one thing about Peter that you could maybe talk about is just his prolific energy and the amount of things he did. He did 800 different poster titles, and his poster titles is almost like a kind of history of American pop culture. He's done 5 Super Bowls, 5 Grammys, World Series, World Cup USA, every sport, every major music event, all of these amazing posters. It's just
yeah, and some posters or images, I do a poster out of a piece of art I like, or I'll take a piece of art and I put a mirror on it, and I like the way it reflects over, so I do a reflection so it has a kaleidoscopic feeling, and I just do what happened was I was once at a printer, it was security printing, and I needed to print something, and on another press, he was doing for somebody that he wanted to show what he could do, what's called a color blend. They call it a split fountain. When you have, I should mention it earlier, when you have the ink, and you have it go from one color to the next, then the next one that has ink, there's always four colors, you have opposite colors. So where the red is, on this side you got green, and where you have blue, you got maybe orange. So I have one color blend goes this way, and the other one goes this way. So when I have these colors opposite each other, they just create this very dynamic thing. And then I have some flat colors. So I did posters, and after a few years, I had 200 posters. I said, my God. So I got an archivist, I have somebody to help me, and I got these filing cabinets. I could only put so much per filing cabinet. I don't need 800 posters in each filing cabinet, just enough to give away one here and one there. And so now I have about 700 to 750 posters, if you can imagine. And the poster collection, I've been signing my posters there. I have a huge table that's from here to the white column, as big as this, and I go around it, and I sign. Thank God my name is not huge, like Leibowitz. It's just M-A-X, M-A-X, M-A-X. And somebody else does the dating for me, So if I have a poster out and it's 1979, Max, 1979. If it's another another poster, 1982, 84, 2000, whatever. And I've signed so far 2,200,000 posters. And now we're talking to people to see if they can market them for me and get them out there. There's some posters there in the book, actually.
And there's also, that's because his name is Max. So once he was signing a poster or a print he did with Jack Nicklaus and the golfer, and Jack Nicklaus was signing his name, Jack Nicklaus, and he was signing Max. So after about 100 signings, Jack Nicklaus was, he says, I wish my name was Max. So Max says, I wish my name was Mo, one letter less.
See, if I had Mo instead of Max, I could have signed 3 million posters in that time.
And the way he signs Max is the way he held his brush as his little Chinese nanny taught him, using the wrist movement. And that's become part of his signature style, actually using the wrist. And how did she teach you? Just to draw circles?
Oh, she was amazing. I'll tell you, when I left China, I was 10 years old and she was probably 14. And as the ship pulled away, I left a kitty cat behind. I have another kitty cat almost in the same colors, gray with little white, and I cried for the kitty cat, and then I cried for the little nanny of mine, Umba. I just cried and cried for an hour, and then we were out at sea. You couldn't see Shanghai anymore, and then I went out and played with my friends. But I still feel, the sadness. And when I went back to Shanghai, it was so, and now I hired a big public relation firm, and they're going to help me find her. She's probably in the 70s. But the only thing I got to do is I got to look through my old stuff in some warehouse, open some box and go, there's a picture of me and her, and like this big. Because how else would she know it's me?
Sure.
She never knew me as Peter Max. I mean, that was my middle name.
I collect your art for my grandchildren. You're part of my life and my legacy to them.
Oh.
I want you to tell me, they're 3 little girls, and I want you to tell me what to tell them. Because what I'm telling them is through your art. Because I'm a 60s hippie girl. And when they see that, this is grandma, hippie. Any of this was influenced by anything other than running? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. So
what I'm saying, was this drug, there was drugs in those days, and I remember...
Not when I was 10.
No, I was on Kings Highway. And
Kings Highway?
I was on Kings Highway, and I took the first LSD trip when I was like 19, and I went to see art, and I realized that's where it came from, all the psychedelic.
It did.
Did that happen to you?
Yes, a little bit. Lucky me.
What is it?
No. Lucky. I played around like everybody. I smoked pot and I did some LSD. But lucky, in 1966, I was in Paris, and I'm like in my mid-20s. I fooled around with it a little bit because I was afraid of it, but I also enjoyed it. But what happened is I met the Swami, and then when I met the Swami, I realized it's all about meditation, third eye. And I never touched anything in my life again for 50 years now. Huh?
I think the reason for that was it opened my eyes wide the creation of it. I only did it once too.
Yeah.
If I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have seen...
You wouldn't have known that exists. Yeah, it's an amazing...
We had that experience, and then one day we saw a poster in the East Village, and it said, "You all Sanpaku," a lecture with...
Michikaku.
No, that wasn't Michikaku. It was George Osawa, who brought macrobiotics to America. And we went to hear a lecture of his, and he was telling us that using marijuana, psychedelic drugs is very, very yin. It's very expansive. But you want to bring balance in, and you want to get more yang. So what he advised us, those of us that were getting high in those days, to go eat some brown rice, miso soup, and seaweed, and get grounded.
Diet.
So we started to realize all about grounding was our first education into whole foods. And then after meeting the Swami and adopting a vegetarian diet, it evolved into a whole new lifestyle, and the New Age pretty much came out of that.
Yeah, it was really amazing. But when we brought the Swami to America, the whole United States, the youth culture was all ready for it. I mean, whoever went there stayed, and signed up. And so many people, and so many famous, I mean, all the Beatles were into yoga with the Maharishi for 30 years of his life. I was just, Paul McCartney called me up, it's about almost 2.5 months ago, or almost 3 months ago. He calls me up, he says, "Hey Peter, I just found your number, and I'm in New York, and I'm only here till tonight. At 9, I'm flying away at 10 or something, and I'm only free from 9. This was like a 8:45 he called me, and he stayed with a friend or somebody that he knew on Central Park West in the 80s. I live on 84th and Riverside, so I'm like 3-4 blocks away. I said, listen, meet me, and we met, and at 10-11 o'clock he said, let me see, and he makes a phone call, stands up, he talks to somebody, he says, Peter, I just canceled my appointments, I can hang out with you till about 2:30. So he hung around at 2:30. At 2 o'clock he makes another phone call. He says, just canceled 3 more things. We're going to hang out, because we enjoyed each other so much. Me with my art concepts, him with his musical, and we both love, I'm fanatic about music, he's fanatic about colors. And then we stayed together till about 8:30. At 8:30 I walked up with him to his apartment and took an elevator up 2 blocks. Everything was packed. We went down. I called one of my car services and took him to the airport, hung around with him, and gave him a couple of hugs and a few kisses, and we just, I love you, call me soon, blah, blah, blah. And then he got on the plane and he waved to me, and then said, oh, what a nice day to be with Paul McCartney. Because, I love music like I love art, and Paul McCartney was like, wasn't he one of the greatest?
He is
The greatest. Oh,
He is
yeah.
the greatest.
Okay.
Any more questions? Otherwise, we have to wind down, I think.
Come on, one more question, anybody? Wow. Okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, you have any thoughts on the sort of contemporary art scene? Is there any, do you go to Chelsea and look at...
Oh yeah, I love the art scene. I love the whole gallery world. And I have a lot of favorite artists and so forth. But to tell you the truth, I love it. I see what's going on, but I'm so involved with my stuff, And I'll be honest, that's all I think about. It's like and the only thing where my thing can expand into is animated movies. It's like something that gets into music. So now it's music touching art and art touching music. And you gotta get good stories involved. And he's a great storyteller. He writes beautifully, so I'm so glad I have someone like you, Victor, in my life. Any more? Anything? Yes, sir.
Who's your inspiration? Did you have any inspiration?
What's my inspiration? The inspiration is that I have the will to create, and I get such enormous joy when I create. So it's like, it's like when you want to go get a shower, and when you're in a shower, that's what you want to be in. When I'm in a creative mood and I have my brushes and I got all my colors and I got the music playing, so much creativity in my mind, what I'm hearing and so forth. Then when I'm painting, the color combinations, and then I make something out of it. Halfway through each painting, I don't know what I'm painting. I know I'm painting an abstract thing that has to be balanced. The colors have to be harmonious and then I put some subject, and sometimes it's a character, and I draw a lot. Sometimes I go on an airplane, I travel a lot, and I have a stack of paper this high, and I just sit there and I draw, and I don't know what I'm drawing, and suddenly it becomes something I would like it to be. Then I give it some more, and it becomes that. I put the paper underneath, I do another one.
And I think the thing that inspires both Peter and I is our creative universe. That we are small. Peter once said we're small creatives in a bigger creative universe. And 2 weeks ago, we found out that the Kepler spacecraft released its assessment that there are 40 billion habitable planets in our galaxy that are like the planet Earth.
Can you imagine?
40 billion in our galaxy, not in our universe.
40 billion planets like planet Earth, 40 billion of planet Earth in our galaxy, the Milky Way. 40 billion. So if even 10% have life like us, there will be 4 billion. And if you take 10% of that, what would it be? 400 million. And if you even took 10% of that, by now we're down to a fraction of 1%, right? It would be 400,000 planets that have life like us. And we only have life like us, but then there's life like little ants, and there's little dogs, and there's kitty cats, and there's probably like several thousand species. So I'm always fascinated. Is anybody fascinated with that stuff? Mm-hmm. See, everybody is. It's the greatest thing, yeah, everybody is. We're very lucky to live in a creative universe, and we're little creatives. But to us, we're big creatives.
I think that's about all that we've got time for this evening. Sorry.
Well, thank you.
But